U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio's visit to Israel has reinforced Washington's hardline stance as he and Netanyahu vow to eliminate Hamas and push Trump's radical vision for Gaza. Meanwhile, Arab states are ramping up diplomatic efforts to counter U.S.-Israeli plans, with Egypt leading efforts to block the forced displacement of Palestinians. At the same time, Trump's aggressive foreign policy doctrine is taking shape, with economic threats against Latin America, heightened tensions with China, and unilateral action sidelining European allies. Is the U.S. heading towards global isolation, or is this the rise of a new world order under Trump? Let's start in focus. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio's visit to Israel signals an aggressive, militarized foreign policy that threatens to escalate tensions in the region. From reaffirming U.S.-Israeli military coordination to backing Trump's extreme visions for Gaza's future, Rubio's statements confirm Washington's unwavering support for Netanyahu's expansionist agenda. But as Arab nations rally against these plans, is the U.S. isolating itself? Ahram Online latest report highlights the alarming alignment between Netanyahu and Rubio as they endorse mass displacement policies in Gaza and threaten military action against Iran, Lebanon, and Syria. The joint press conference made it clear the United States is fully backing Israel's aggressive strategies while dismissing diplomatic solutions. But with growing Arab rejection of Trump's ethnic cleansing plan for Gaza, Rubio's visit could deepen U.S. estrangement from key regional players. Joining us now is Ahmed Maharim, writer and political researcher. Welcome, sir, to In Focus. And we start off with asking you, Rubio's visit comes at a time of heightened regional tensions, especially regarding Gaza. What do you make of this remarks on eliminating Hamas and Trump's so-called bold vision for Gaza's future, sir?
Since many times Minister of Foreign Affairs, big officials from American administration are visiting Israel to discuss the future of Hamas and the future of Middle East conflict. But for the last 2 days, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Secretary, Mark Rubio, has visited Israel, and his meeting with the Israeli leaders. It seems like the discussion shows like instead of keeping a chance for peace in the area, there is an escalating shows that usually he mentioned and he stressed the full support of American administration to Israel. Shows like the statements came out of him insist that there is no more Hamas to be in the region. That's very sensitive matter. We didn't hear anything from Hamas saying that statement is correct or not. The future of the upcoming meeting in Riyadh, Thursday, and also 27th in the Arab League will be meeting in Cairo. They are requested by the American leaders to have an Arab agenda or Arab answer to what Benjamin Netanyahu and Trump are seeking to the future of the area. I think instead of having some kind of peace negotiation, there is an escalating in the tone and in the manner of Mark Rubio with the Israeli leaders. So I hope things can come out from the Arab leaders to show how strong they are and how the rejection of Arab countries has to make a stop to all these dreams of Benjamin Netanyahu.
So your answer brings us to another question, which is the Arab League and the key nations like Egypt and Jordan have rejected US-Israeli plans for forced displacements. With Egypt set to host an emergency Arab summit, which you just mentioned, sir, on the 27th, do you see a coordinated response emerging against these policies?
Well, I think Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, they have a lot of negotiation and discussion in order to make those two kinds of meetings are successful. But from the other side, I don't think that they can see on the end of the tunnel that there is some kind of, elasticity or reliability from administration of Trump or administration of Benjamin Netanyahu. But hence, I would that not only Arabs are against the matter, the big power in the world like China and Russia, plus most of the European countries are having a negative impact with what Trump have brought to the future of relation with Europe and other countries. I think it's important for the Arab countries to utilize all these conditions in order that can be a kind of support to the upcoming negotiation. Hamas is not easy that they have to leave the area. 50,000 people have left their life. 150,000 are already having a lot of whatever casualties. The country is really a mess. 90% are demolished. So there is a price that was already paid ahead. You think Hamas will be that easy to move or to leave the area because Benjamin Netanyahu and Trump are aggressive, deciding this is the kind of the future? I doubt very much that something like that can happen.
Trump's administration insists there is no alternative to its Gaza plan. Yet the Palestinian Authority and regional actors propose a Palestinian land reconstruction effort. How visible is the alternative given Washington's opposition, sir?
Well, I think Egypt has another kind of proposal, and that proposal have A and B with time frame and cost as well. Sometime I think Benjamin Netanyahu is playing around, is just trying to escape and gain time. What's his main objective is to release all detainees under Hamas. But it sounds like as soon as the detainees will be free, he has a plan B, which he is ready to do more force attack in order that he would like to demolish Hamas. He could not do that for the last 15 months. I think he is relying with the green light he took from Trump. Trump gave him power, gave him different military equipment, more sophisticated than the previous one. And also, Trump said the decision finally has to be from the Israeli side.
The United States and Israel are openly coordinating military strategies, with Netanyahu vowing to finish the job against Iran. Do you think that this rhetoric signals imminent conflict? And what could be the consequences, sir?
I think with the kind of escalating and the warm welcome Netanyahu have received in the White House and previously in the Congress a few months ago, I think there is different plans. For the last couple of months, he succeeded to put an end to different leaders in Hamas, in Hezbollah, in Syria and Iraq, even the attack al-Houthi in Yemen a couple of times. I think Benjamin Netanyahu, his eye is time frame to Iran. Some time ago, the previous administration, the Democrat, would not agree with him to do something with Iran. And that's what we could understand from the previous talking. President Trump said he came to achieve the peace in the area. But with that kind of escalating in the matter, I think a kind of step, it will have sometime, somehow, Iran could be in the agenda. And he felt so proud after his visit to Washington. Netanyahu, he can do, after he finished Hamas, somehow he can extend his efforts to do something with Iran, unfortunately.
Ahmed Maharim, thank you very much for your insights. And Rubio's visit to Israel underscores Washington's unwavering support for Netanyahu's agenda, signaling a dangerous shift towards escalating rather than diplomacy. As Arab nations push back against United States-Israeli plans for Gaza, the region stands at a critical crossroads. But beyond the Middle East, Trump's foreign policy is shaking the global order. From economic coercion to military threats, his administration is rewriting America's engagement with the world. Is this a strategic recalibration, or is the United States isolating itself further? Donald Trump's foreign policy has taken a dramatic turn in his second term, reshaping America's global alliances. From economic warfare to military confrontations, his administration is aggressively redefining U.S. engagement worldwide. But as Trump's policies disrupt traditional diplomacy, is Washington gaining leverage or undermining its long-term influence? The Hill's latest analysis argues that Trump's disruptive tactics are not just reshaping U.S. foreign relations, but actively fueling instability. For coherence, Mexico and Central America to encountering China's influence in Latin America, Trump's America's First doctrine prioritizes pressure over diplomacy. While some argue that these tactics have yielded short-term gains, they risk pushing key global players into rival spheres of influence, especially China and Russia. And in this context, we're joined now by David K. Johnson, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and professor of Rochester Institute of Technology. Welcome, sir, to In Focus, and a very warm welcome, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today and know more about, of course, your vision about what's going on in the region. Sir, Trump's foreign policy, of course, with unilateralism, his priority is over traditional diplomacy. How do you assess this shift, and what does it mean for America's long-term global standing?
Well, Rana, in the long term, this is very bad for the United States. Now, I've reported on Donald Trump for almost 37 years. I have a very long history with him as a journalist. And Donald lives in a world he makes up in his own head. If he says something, that makes it true, or as I like to say, Donald creates his own reality. And he doesn't know anything about the Middle East. I mean, this is a man who did not even know why there's a memorial at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii over the ship that was sunk by the Japanese in 1941. He didn't know that. Had to be explained to him. If you were to ask Donald, tell me about the effect of the Nakba, he'd go, what? If you said to him, well, what is the difference between being Sunni or Shia, and how does that affect Middle East politics? He'd have no idea what you were asking about. Donald seriously believes that if he says something, that makes it so, and he has the power to make it so. Why Egypt or Jordan, for example, would accept Palestinians from the Gaza is beyond any reasonable person's understanding. And then underlying this, remember that Donald hates Muslims. He wanted to bar all Muslims from entering the United States 8 years ago. He makes an exception if you're a super wealthy Muslim. Otherwise, he doesn't like you. He doesn't want you in the U.S. And these ideas he has aligned with Benjamin Netanyahu's government, and it's
Sir Johnson, I don't want to interrupt you, but why does he make a difference if whoever is a super wealthy Muslim? Why does he consider?
Because all over his life, Donald has received vast sums of money from people who are very wealthy. Russians, especially Russian gangsters, mobsters, paid premium prices for apartments in his Trump Tower because, unlike other buildings in New York, he didn't care who you were as long as you paid him above market prices. And he said that. He said that repeatedly spoken well of people who put money in his pocket, particularly when they pay prices way above the norm. And he identifies with rich people and dictators.
Perfect, sir. His administration is openly pressuring Latin American countries, forcing policy changes through economic threats. Do you think these strong arm tactics are sustainable, or could they push nations closer to China and Russia, sir?
Oh, I think that China in particular benefits a great deal from this, and shutting down U.S. humanitarian aid, that's 42% of all the humanitarian aid in the world, is just a gift to President Xi in China. And unlike Donald Trump, an appallingly ignorant man, President Xi is a very sophisticated, highly educated person. So Russia will get some gains, but their economy is in such bad shape, there's not a lot they can do. But China will be a big winner here. And over time, Netanyahu has been turning Israel into a pariah country, and Donald Trump could do that to the United States if he's not checked.
The Trump administration is also aggressively countering China's presence in global trade. From tariffs to direct interventions in Latin America, could this strategy backfire and accelerate China's influence in the region, sir? But based on it can.
Absolutely can. Donald assumes that if he says something like, I'm going to put a tariff on your country's goods, that you're just going to roll over and do it. And he also thinks the country pays the tariffs. They don't. American consumers pay these. But Mexico, Canada, China, other countries he is trying to change the order with, they're not going to just roll over and do what he wants. In fact, the provincial premiers, essentially governors of the Canadian provinces, were on Capitol Hill last week, and they literally asked senior members of the U.S. Congress, is Donald Trump going to send the army into Canada to invade it? Because he talks about making it the 51st state. And the U.S. in the early days of the 19th century invaded Canada 3 times. So it's not unreasonable for Canadians to fear military action against them by the United States.
Trump, sir, America's first doctrine extends to Europe, where tensions are rising over his dismissive approach towards NATO. Could this push European nations towards greater military independence, and what would that mean for transatlantic relations?
Well, NATO was formed in 1945 to create a permanent alliance to prevent future wars after World War II. Trump has now made it very clear, himself, his Secretary of State, and his utterly unqualified Defense Secretary, that they side with the Kremlin and want to force Ukraine to give up a lot of territory and not have any real guarantees of protection. The other NATO countries now have to decide how much they're going to spend to stop the promises repeatedly made by Vladimir Putin that he intends to conquer now independent countries that were once part of the Soviet Empire before the Iron Curtain came down 25 years ago. And Donald, in fact, has not ruled out military attacks on Denmark, a NATO ally, if it doesn't hand over Greenland. So I think Donald is creating a lot of instability. I think he's very much helping dictators who want to expand their territory, both President Xi, who has large geographic claims, and Vladimir Putin, who's very clear about his intentions for the future.
David Kay, Trump's unilateral engagement with Putin over Ukraine peace talks has raised concerns in Europe. Do you think these back-channel negotiations are sidelining US allies? And what risks do they pose for European security?
Well, it's very clear from the recent meeting in Munich that European leaders who, unlike Donald, are sophisticated and understand geopolitics and history, are alarmed about what's happening here. They are very worried that Donald Trump is going to turn the United States not into a checking force against Vladimir Putin's designs on conquering people and putting them under the Moscow's boot again, but that he will disrupt their own behaviors within Europe. Now, Trump has long called for more spending by European countries on the military, and most of those countries have increased their military spending. What will be interesting to watch, Rana, is do these countries continue to support Ukraine, or do they go along with Donald Trump's one-sided plan, a peace plan negotiated between Trump and Putin with no input of any significance by the Ukrainians, which would mean defeat for the Ukrainians in terms of regaining control of all of their territory.
Professor Johnson, his administration's aggressive stance on Iran, alongside Israel, suggests a heightened risk of military conflict. Do you see Trump's policy as a deterrent or an escalation toward war?
Oh, I think this is very escalating by Trump. I mean, let's remember that Donald Trump orchestrated when he was in the White House before the assassination of a top Iranian general. It also killed a Hamas leader in the process. Donald believes there would be no kickback. Of course not. He did this. It's the right thing to do. Why would the Iranians do anything in response? And this is a legacy in Iran that goes back to 1954, when the U.S. government overthrew the democratically elected leader of Iran and installed the Shah. And the enmity it's created between the Iranian peoples and the American government is reversible, but you would have to work at that, and you'd have to know what the background is. And Trump has no idea about what the background of this is.
What will the background be, sir?
Well, it was the U.S. that put the Shah in with his Savak and his torture teams, ruthless dictator who was finally overthrown in 1979 when there was an uprising by young people. Those forces remain in power. I mean, think about this. Iran and Russia were enemies for 1,000 years, and now they're cooperating with each other. Clearly, U.S. foreign policy as it applies to Iran has been a complete failure. But if Donald Trump doesn't understand the history, he doesn't understand the conflict between the religious leaders who are the political leaders in Iran with those of the neighboring Arab states, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, there's no way he can come up with a policy that makes any sense and that seeks to de-escalate and to manage the differences between these Arab governments.
Professor Johnson, looking at the broader picture, does Trump's approach to foreign policy represent a short-term recalibration, or is he fundamentally altering the U.S.'s role in global affairs?
Well, he is absolutely, Rana, fundamentally changing the U.S. position in global affairs. Now, how long this will go on is another question. Under the U.S. Constitution...
Do you have an answer to this question, sir?
I'm sorry.
Do you have an answer to this question, which is how long?
Oh, well, that's what I was getting to. He doesn't have the power to do a lot of what he's doing. He's being challenged in court. But as long as he pursues this, it's going to be long-term strategy. And keep in mind, Donald Trump doesn't plan to leave the White House. He intends to become America's dictator. He just said, literally within 24 hours, that anything he does to save the country is lawful. That's absolutely not true, but it tells you that his impulse is to be a dictator, as I've been warning people for almost a decade. And a dictator will get America into lots of trouble, make it a pariah nation, destabilize world events, and cause a great deal of harm. So the question is there going to be a reaction at some point from Congress, from the courts, from American voters?
Before I wrap up this very, very informative episode or segment with you, sir, Professor David, how do you read the future of U.S. President Donald Trump's policies globally?
He's going to continue to assert that everything he does is perfect, that you must bend to his will. There's going to be a lot of pushback. There's going to be huge opportunities for China in particular to expand its influence. And we may see the end of the NATO alliance, which has been crucial to keeping the peace for 80 years, because Donald Trump doesn't know what he's doing when it comes to the NATO alliance.
It's not only when it comes to the NATO alliance, sir. Is it only when it comes to the NATO alliance from your own perspective?
I'm sorry, say it again?
I'm asking you, is it only when it comes to the NATO alliance at this point?
Oh, no. Donald's view of the world is ill-informed. It's ignorant. And so whoever last spoke to Donald, whoever last flattered him, because he's very subject to flattery, will have his mind fixed on some point. And once Donald has an idea in his head, it's almost impossible to get it out of there, no matter how ridiculous it is. Like his belief that China, Canada, and Mexico will bear the cost of tariffs, not the American people, which anybody who took a basic economics course could tell him, but he doesn't believe that. So his ignorance, his fixed ideas, and his belief that he's all powerful and everyone will do what he says, that can't lead to anywhere but more trouble in the world.
Unfortunately, I have to end this segment, and I'll make sure, as Professor David K. Johnston, of course, it was very informative, intellectual, and I'd love to be with you always and listen more. We appreciate very much your valuable intellectual insights. Trump's foreign policy thrives on disruption, of course, making short-term gains a priority over long-term stability, whether through trade wars, military escalations, or diplomatic pressure. His approach is reshaping America's global role, but at what cost? That brings us to the end of today's episode of In Focus. Stay with us for more analysis. I'm Rana Qassas. Thank you very much for watching.